Christmas dinner, my mother raised her glass and said, "I want to thank my oldest daughter for making me a grandmother because at least one of my daughters knows what a woman is for," while looking at me. I was sitting across the table holding a glass of water because I was the one who organized the dinner and bought all the food and cooked everything from the turkey to the pie because my mother told me 2 weeks earlier that she wanted a real Christmas this year. Faye was sitting next to her with her 3 kids who were throwing dinner rolls at each other and nobody corrected them. My mother clinked her glass and everyone raised theirs, and I just sat there because what was I supposed to toast to? My own mother just told a table of 14 people that I hadn't done anything meaningful with my life because I didn't have children. I was 31 years old, and I had been taking care of my mother since I was 23. Her mortgage was $1,100 a month, and I paid it every single month because after my father passed, she couldn't afford it on her pension. I never told anyone because my mother asked me not to. She said it would embarrass her if people knew her youngest daughter was covering her bills, so I kept it between us. I also paid her car insurance and her electric bill, and covered the deductible when she needed her gallbladder removed 2 years ago. Every month I transferred money into her account so it looked like she was handling everything herself. She wanted to appear independent, and I respected that, even when it cost me vacations and savings and sleep. Faye never paid for a single thing. Faye showed up to holidays with her kids and left early because the kids were cranky. Faye borrowed money from our mother regularly and never paid it back, which meant she was really borrowing my money without knowing it. But Faye had children, so Faye was the accomplished daughter. After that toast, I finished my plate and cleaned the counter and drove home. 2 months later, my mother called a family meeting at her house. When I got there, Faye was already sitting on the couch with her husband Dominic, and their kids were running through the living room knocking into furniture. My mother sat us down and said she'd been thinking about her legacy, and she wanted to make sure it went to the child who was actually building a family. She looked at me and said she was signing the house over to Faye. She reasoned that Faye had 3 children who needed room to grow, and I was a single woman with no kids, so I didn't need a 3-bedroom house. The house I had been paying the mortgage on for 8 years. The house that would have been paid off in 3 more years because of my money. I asked her if she was serious. She said she'd already spoken to a lawyer and the paperwork was drawn up. Faye sat there and didn't say one word. Dominic studied the floor. My mother slid a piece of paper toward me and asked me to sign something confirming I had no financial interest in the property. I told her I wasn't signing anything and I left. On my way out, she called me ungrateful. She said the house was hers to do with as she pleased, and that I was being selfish for not wanting my nieces and nephew to have a stable home. 3 weeks later, she signed the house over to Faye without needing anything from me because the title had always been in her name alone. She had only wanted my signature so it wouldn't look bad. The day the title transferred to Faye, the mortgage became Faye's responsibility. I stopped sending the monthly payment because the house belonged to someone else now. The first missed payment came and went. The second one triggered a letter from the bank addressed to the new homeowner. Faye called me panicking because she had never seen a mortgage statement in her life and didn't understand why the bank was saying she owed money. She thought the house was fully paid off. She thought our mother owned it free and clear. My mother had never told Faye that I was making the payments. Faye and Dominic did not have $1,100 a month to spare. They were already stretched with 3 kids in daycare and 2 car payments and credit card balances they had been carrying for years. Faye called our mother and asked why she'd given her a house that still had a mortgage on it. My mother said she didn't know there was still a balance because she thought her pension had been covering it. She either genuinely forgot I was the one making those payments, or she chose not to remember. The bank didn't care whose name used to be on the title. Within 5 months, Faye was behind on everything. She and Dominic argued about money every day. My mother was still living in the house with them because that had been part of the arrangement. 3 adults and 3 children crammed into a house that nobody could afford to keep. My mother called me in April. She didn't apologize. She said I needed to start sending money again because the family was falling apart. After I hung up on Rosemary that night, I opened the calculator on my phone and added up every single payment I'd made over 8 years. Mortgage, insurance, electric, medical. The number that stared back at me was over $130,000. I had never seen it all at once. I had been invisible for that long. The first call that really mattered came from Faye. It was late on a Tuesday night, and when I answered, she wasn't yelling. She was crying. The kind of crying where someone sounds like they just found out something that broke the way they understood their own life. She said, "Did you know about the mortgage? Did Mom lie to me too?" I told her plainly. I said, "I paid every month for 8 years. Mom told me to keep it quiet." There was silence on the other end for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Because Mom asked me not to, and I trusted her." She said she needed to think, and she hung up. That was the first crack. 2 days later, my phone rang again, and it was Faye, but she sounded like a completely different person. Her voice was tight and flat, and I could tell someone had been coaching her on what to say. She said, "Look, I get that you helped Mom, but that doesn't mean you can just cut us off. My kids live here." Dominic had gotten to her. Dominic, who had sat on that couch and stared at the floor while Rosemary handed them a house I paid for, had taken the whole situation and twisted it. In his version, this wasn't about our mother lying to everyone. This was about me punishing children. Then Rosemary started making calls. Not to me, to everyone else. She called uncles and aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. She called people who had been at that Christmas dinner and laughed along with her toast. Her version was simple. Her version was that I had money and I was refusing to help my sister keep a roof over 3 little kids' heads. About 4 days later, my phone rang and it was my uncle, Daniil's brother. He didn't even let me say hello. He said, "Your mother is really upset. She says you're refusing to help your sister keep a roof over those babies' heads. What happened to you?" I told him there was more to it. I told him I had been paying the mortgage for years and nobody knew. He cut me off before I could finish. He said, "Family helps family. That's how your father would have wanted it." That hit me in a place I wasn't ready for. My father was gone and the people who were left had decided to use his memory like a weapon against me. He told me to think about what kind of person I wanted to be, and then he hung up. That night I called Edmund. Edmund was my best friend, and the one person in my life who had nothing to do with my family. He had known me since college and had watched me give and give for years, without ever saying what it was costing me. I told him everything. The calculator total. Faye's 2 phone calls. Dominic twisting the story. Rosemary calling everyone. My uncle throwing my father's name at me. Edmund listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "You need to stop explaining yourself one person at a time. They're all getting Rosemary's version. You need to tell your version once, to everyone, at the same same time, with proof, so nobody can claim they heard a different story from a different source. 5 days later, I came home from work, and there was an envelope in my mailbox. It wasn't from the bank. It wasn't from Rosemary. It was from Faye and Dominic. I opened it standing in my hallway and pulled out a single typed page. It was a formal written request asking me to contribute to the household since I had benefited from the family home during the years she helped with expenses. It was worded like I had been some kind of tenant who lived there for free and owed rent. I had never lived in that house. I had my own apartment. I had been sending money from my own bank account to cover a mortgage on a house I visited maybe 4 times a year. Dominic wrote it. I could tell by the way it was worded, all stiff and careful, like someone who had looked up legal templates online. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't anything that would hold up anywhere. But that wasn't the point. The point was they were building a paper trail. They were creating a record so later, if anyone questioned them, they could hold up this letter and say they tried. That letter changed something in me. I had been hurt and angry and reactive. I hadn't been planning. But that letter told me Dominic was thinking ahead. Rosemary was thinking ahead. They had a plan for me, and that plan was to keep squeezing until I either paid up or looked like a monster. So I needed a plan of my own. I spent the next 2 weeks pulling every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every record I had going back 8 years. I organized it into one big 3-ring binder with tab dividers between each year, mortgage payments, car insurance, electric bills, the gallbladder deductible from 2 years ago. Every time I thought I had everything, I'd find another charge I'd forgotten. A plumber she called that I covered. A property tax payment she said she'd handle, and then didn't. When I was done, the binder was thick and heavy, and it felt like holding 8 years of my life in my hands. Edmund came over the night I finished. He flipped through it with me page by page, making sure nothing was out of order. Then he leaned back and said, "This isn't just proof. This is a story nobody can argue with." He told me, "Don't go in angry. Go in calm. Calm is scarier. Anger gives people something to fight against, but calm makes them nervous because they can't predict what you're going to do next." So I practiced. I stood in my living room alone at night and I said the words out loud. I went through the numbers. The first few times my voice shook and I had to stop and start over. By the 5th or 6th time, I could get through the whole thing without my voice cracking. About a week into my organizing, Rosemary called and told me she was planning a big family cookout for Memorial Day weekend. She said it would be nice to have everyone together and that she hoped I would come. I said I'd be there. She sounded relieved, like she thought I was ready to make peace. She had no idea I was coming to make a point. 3 days before the cookout, she called again. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. She said, "I'm glad you're coming, and I hope you've had time to think about what I asked, about helping with the house." I looked at the binder sitting on my counter and I said, "I've thought about it a lot." I could hear her relax through the phone. She thought I meant yes. The night before the cookout, my phone buzzed with a text from Faye. She wrote, "Mom says you're coming tomorrow. Dominic and I want to talk to you privately before everyone else gets there. Can you come early?" I could picture Dominic standing behind her while she typed it, telling her exactly what to say. They wanted to corner me without witnesses so the whole thing would be settled before anyone arrived. I typed back 4 words. "I'll be there at noon with everyone else." She didn't respond. I pulled up to the house at noon on the dot. The front yard had been transformed with folding tables covered in plastic tablecloths, and mismatched chairs pulled from inside the house, and probably borrowed from neighbors. There were coolers lined up against the fence, and someone had set up a portable grill near the side of the garage. I counted roughly 20 people already there. Uncles and aunts and cousins I only ever saw at events like this. I parked on the street and sat in my car for about 30 seconds just looking at it all. The bag with the binder was on my passenger seat. I picked it up and got out. Rosemary came down the porch steps with her arms already open and pulled me into a hug that lasted way too long. She held on to me like we were reuniting after years apart instead of weeks of her calling everyone we were related to and telling them I was the problem. She whispered in my ear, "I'm so glad you came, baby. Let's just have a nice day." I hugged her back and said, "That's exactly what I want, Mom." About 20 minutes in, I was standing near the cooler getting a bottle of water when Faye appeared next to me. She looked tired. Her eyes were a little puffy. Dominic was about 15 feet away, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed, watching us, just standing there like a lookout. Faye said quietly, "We still need to talk about the house. Dominic thinks we should all sit down with a mediator." I twisted the cap off my water bottle. I said, "I don't need a mediator, Faye. Mom told you that house was free and clear. She lied to you too. But instead of being mad at her, you're standing here trying to squeeze money out of me." Her jaw tightened and her nostrils did that little flare thing they always did when she was trying not to cry or trying not to yell. She turned around and walked away without another word. After that, things got quiet for a while. For about an hour, the cookout actually felt like a cookout. The food was good. People were talking and laughing. And in the middle of all of it was Rosemary. She moved through that yard like she owned every conversation in it. She touched people's arms. She kissed cheeks. She refilled people's cups before they asked. This was what Rosemary did. She managed how things looked. She decided who got credit and who got ignored and who stood in the spotlight and who stayed in the background writing checks. And I had helped her do it for 8 years by keeping my mouth shut. Just before 2 o'clock, when most people had eaten, Rosemary walked to the main table and tapped a plastic cup 3 times. The yard turned toward her. They always did. She loved a speech. She started talking about family, about sacrifice, about how Daniil would have been proud to see everyone here together. Then her eyes found me. "I just want to say that this family has been through some hard times lately, but I raised my girls to stick together. And I know my youngest is going to do the right thing because that's how I raised her." She smiled at me. My uncle, the one who had called me and told me my father would be ashamed of me, nodded slowly like the matter was already settled. One of my cousins gave me an encouraging look. Rosemary had set this whole thing up. The cookout was a stage. The family was the audience. The speech was the trap. She wanted the weight of 20 people looking at me to do what her phone calls, and Faye's tears and Dominic's letter couldn't. And 6 months ago, it would have worked. But 6 months ago, I hadn't seen $130,000 on a calculator screen. 6 months ago, I didn't have a binder in my bag. I stood up. I reached into my bag and pulled it out. Rosemary's smile didn't drop yet. She didn't know what it was. I held the binder in front of me with both hands and said, "Since Mom wants to talk about doing the right thing, I think everyone here should know what doing the right thing has looked like for me for the past 8 years." The shift on Rosemary's face was instant. The warm smile fell away like a mask being pulled pulled off. She stepped toward me and her voice dropped low. Sit down. This isn't the time. I said. You made it the time, Mom. You just told 20 people I need to do the right thing, so let me show them what I've already done. I opened the binder to the first tab and started reading. January 2016, $1,100. Mortgage payment. I flipped the page. February 2016, $1,100. Mortgage payment. I flipped again. March 2016, $1,100. Mortgage payment plus $240 for the electric bill. I kept going. Month after month. Page after page. April, May, June. Every page had a bank transfer with a date stamp and an amount, and the account it came from and the account it went to. The yard got quieter with every month. The conversations had already stopped after the first few pages, but now even the background noises started to fade. No one was checking their phone. They were all just looking at me while I read number after number. I got through 2016 and into 2017, and the silence was so thick I could hear the ice shifting in the coolers. Then Rosemary found her voice. She said it loud enough for the whole yard to hear. Stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked up and said, No, Mom, I'm embarrassing you, because you told me to never tell anyone. So I kept your secret for 8 years while you told people I was the daughter who hadn't done anything with my life. My uncle stood up from his chair, slow, like a man who was just realizing he might have made a mistake. He looked at Rosemary and said, Is this true, Rosemary? For the first time since I started talking, every single person in that yard was looking at my mother instead of me. She made a little gesture like she was waving something away. She's exaggerating. She helped out a little here and there. It wasn't like that. I held the binder up so everyone could see how thick it was. 8 tabs sticking out the side. Every bank transfer is right here. Dates, amounts, account numbers, 8 years, over $130,000. Does that sound like a little here and there? Nobody said a word. My uncle sat back down in his chair, slow, like the air had gone out of him. That was when Faye started crying. She turned toward our mother and her voice came out broken. You told me the house was paid off. You told me Dad's life insurance handled it. You lied to me. Rosemary snapped back like a reflex. I didn't lie. I just didn't explain every little detail. That was when Dominic, who had not said a single word since I arrived, who had spent the last 2 months writing letters and coaching Faye, muttered loud enough for the whole yard to hear. Every little detail? We're about to lose the house because of your little details. Rosemary's head snapped toward him. I could see panic on her face because Dominic saying that out loud meant the situation was worse than she had been letting on. The house wasn't just tight. It was going under. And now 20 people knew it. She tried to take control back. She put her hand flat on the table and raised her voice. This is private family business and my daughter has no right to air it out like this. She looked around the yard expecting someone to back her up. Nobody did. So I spoke. You aired it out first, Mom. At Christmas. In front of 14 people. You said at least one of your daughters knows what a woman is for. All while I was the one keeping your lights on. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The woman who always had something to say had nothing. The whole yard saw it. I closed the binder and held it against my chest and said, I'm not asking for the money back. I'm not asking for the house. I'm asking for one thing. I looked at her. Tell me the truth, right now, in front of everyone. Did you know I was the one paying your mortgage every single month? She looked at me and her lip trembled. She said quietly, You offered. I said, That's not what I asked. Did you know? She looked at the ground. She looked at the faces around the yard. All those relatives she had called and fed her version to. And then she nodded, small and slow. Every single person saw it. I let it sit. Then I said, And when you signed the house over to Faye, did you think about what that meant for me? She said, Faye needed it more. She has children. I said, I needed it too, Mom. I just never said it because you told me not to need anything out loud. You trained me to be quiet and useful and invisible. And it worked. Until now. That was when Faye stood up. Her face was swollen from crying. She said, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were paying for everything. I looked at her and I believed her. I said, I believe you. But you knew Mom treated me differently. You sat at that Christmas table and heard what she said and you didn't say one word. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She looked down at the table because there was nothing to say. She had picked up her glass and clinked it along with everyone else. Rosemary sat down heavy in the folding chair behind her like her legs decided they were done holding her up. She put her hand over her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was small in a way I had never heard before. She said, I told myself it didn't count because you could afford it. I told myself you had a good job and no kids so it was easy for you. I told myself it wasn't the same as real sacrifice. I set the binder down on the table in front of me. Then I said, I'm not coming back to these family events for a while. I love you, Mom. I love you, Faye. But I'm done being the daughter who pays for everything and gets nothing. I picked up my purse and walked through the yard, past the folding tables and the coolers and the lawn chairs full of relatives who all watched me go. Not one of them said a word. Not one tried to stop me. When I passed my uncle, he gave me a small nod. I nodded back and kept walking. I went through the side gate and got in my car. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and did not look back at a house that was never mine.